us reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't be tamed. For Muguland's freedom, our fire's inflamed. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lies. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. The streets are burning with the passion of the brave. No chains can hold us, no power can.
As the Igwerian movement grew in strength and numbers, Paul Igwe, the man at the center of it all, found himself walking a delicate tightrope. After decamping from his original political party, Igwe had joined the Workers' People's Party, a small but passionate party that had long championed the cause of the common people. However, the WPP had never seen anything like the Igwerians, a massive, vocal, and self-funding group of supporters who were fiercely loyal to Igwe and relentless in their pursuit of a better Muguland. What should have been a natural alliance quickly turned into a tenuous and fragile relationship. The WPP, which had always struggled to gain a foothold on the national stage, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight thanks to Igwe's popularity and the Igwerians' fervent support. But rather than embrace this newfound energy, the party's leadership found themselves wary of the Igwerians, unsure of how to manage this powerful but unpredictable force. The Workers' People's Party had never had a leader with the national stature of Paul Igwe. For years, the party had languished on the fringes of Muguland's political scene, advocating for workers' rights and social justice but never truly breaking through to the mainstream. Igwe's arrival should have been a game-changer, but instead, it created anxiety within the party's ranks. The party's leaders, most of whom were old-school politicians who had built their careers on grassroots organizing and traditional political tactics, were unprepared for the digital dynamism that the Igwerians brought to the table. The party had never dealt with such a large, tech-savvy and vocal group of supporters, and their response was cautious, perhaps overly so. Instead of integrating the Igwerians into the party structure, the WPP kept them at arm's length. The party leadership saw the Igwerians not as allies but as a potential threat to their control. They feared that the movement's energy and loyalty to Igwe might eclipse the party itself, reducing the WPP to nothing more than a vehicle for Igwe's ambitions. At the same time, the party's leadership struggled to keep up with the rapid pace of the digital age. While the Igwerians were organizing Twitter spaces, launching viral hashtags, and creating powerful online campaigns, the WPP's responses were slow, clunky, and often out of touch. The disconnect between the tech-savvy Igwerians and the party's old-school leadership became increasingly apparent, and tensions began to rise. For the Igwerians, the WPP's reluctance to fully embrace them was frustrating. They had poured their time, energy, and money into supporting Paul Igwe, and they saw the WPP's slow responses and cautious approach as a drag on their candidate's momentum. The Igwerians were used to moving fast, making decisions on the fly, and taking bold actions. The WPP's old-fashioned ways felt like a ball and chain, holding them back from achieving their goals. "Why are we even bothering with them?" asked Kemi during a heated Twitter space discussion. "The party is stuck in the past. We're the future. Our loyalty is to Paul Igwe, not to a bunch of politicians who can't even figure out how to use Twitter." This sentiment was echoed by many within the movement. The Igwerians began to publicly criticize the WPP, calling out its leaders for being out of touch and out of date. They accused the party of being a hindrance to Igwe's campaign, rather than an asset. One particularly explosive incident occurred when the WPP issued a statement criticizing the Igwerians for their unruly behavior and calling for a more disciplined approach to political advocacy. The statement was met with immediate backlash. "Unruly? We're the ones doing the work," tweeted at Igwe warriors. "While they sit in their offices, we're out here fighting for change. If they can't keep up, maybe they should step aside." The conflict played out across social media, with Igwerians and WPP leaders trading barbs in a very public and very messy dispute. The WPP's attempts to assert control over the movement only fueled the Igwerians' anger, and soon the two sides were locked in a bitter struggle for dominance. As the conflict dragged on, a new and more troubling question began to emerge among the more cerebral and reflective members of the Igwerians. If Paul Igwe couldn't manage this conflict between his supporters and his party, how could he be expected to lead an entire nation? "I believe in Paul Igwe, but this isn't a good look," said Prince Wankoko in a Twitter space titled Leadership in Crisis. Wankoko, who had already faced his own battles within the movement, was one of the few who dared to publicly question Igwe's leadership. He needs to step in and resolve this. If he can't, then maybe he's not the leader we thought he was. Others agreed, pointing out that Igwe's silence on the matter was damaging not only to the movement but to his credibility as a leader. The Igwerians had always prided themselves on their loyalty to Igwe, but now, for the first time, that loyalty was being tested. "Where is Igwe?" tweeted at Real Igwerian. "We're out here fighting for him and he's nowhere to be found. Leadership means stepping up when it matters. We need him to take control or we risk losing everything we've worked for." As the internal skirmishes between the Igwerians and the WPP escalated, the Agadongo People's Party and Chief Bisola Elenian supporters saw an opportunity to exploit the situation. They began circulating stories that painted the Igwerians as a disorganized and self-serving group, driven more by internal power struggles than by any real commitment to change. "See what we've been saying all along?" sneered a commentator on CVT TV during a segment titled The Igwerians' True Colors. "They claim to be fighting for a better Muguland, but look at them. They can't even work with their own party. This isn't a movement for change, it's a power grab by people who are only in it for themselves." The narrative gained traction, particularly among undecided voters who were already wary of the Igwerians' aggressive tactics. The conflict with the WPP was not just an internal issue, it was becoming a public relations disaster, threatening to undermine everything the movement had achieved. In the end, Paul Igwe chose not to intervene decisively in the conflict. Whether out of a desire to avoid alienating either side, or simply out of a reluctance to wade into the messy dynamics of the dispute, Igwe remained largely silent. His refusal to take a firm stance left many within the movement disillusioned. For the Igwerians, the lack of leadership was a bitter pill to swallow. They had dedicated themselves to Igwe, believing him to be the leader who could bring about real change. But as the conflict dragged on, it became increasingly clear that Igwe's hands-off approach was costing them dearly. The tension between the Igwerians and the Workers' People's Party never fully resolved. While the movement continued to push forward, the rift left scars that would not easily heal. And for the first time, doubts about Paul Igwe's ability to lead Muguland began to take root within the very movement that had propelled him to the forefront of the nation's political landscape. As the elections loomed ever closer, the Igwerians faced the daunting challenge of keeping their movement intact while navigating the complex and often treacherous waters of party politics. The question on everyone's mind was whether they could overcome these internal divisions in time, or whether the very forces that had driven them to the brink of power would ultimately be their undoing.
Episode 12, Muguwood Shakes as the Igwerians Split the Industry. The rise of the Igwerian movement had sparked a cultural and political revolution across Muguland. As the nation wrestled with questions of justice, equity, and the future of its democracy, the impact of the movement reverberated far beyond the traditional political sphere. One of the most significant and unexpected battlegrounds became Muguwood, the nation's vibrant film and music industry. Muguwood had always been more than just entertainment. It was a reflection of Muguland's soul, a mirror held up to society. But as the Igwerians clashed with the ruling elite, the industry found itself torn apart, with actors, directors, musicians, and producers forced to take sides in a growing class war that would define the nation's future. The Igwerian stars. Two of Muguwood's biggest stars, Femi Falomo and Amaka Bradshaw, became unlikely but passionate champions of the Igwerian cause. Femi, a charismatic and influential actor known for his powerful roles in dramas that tackled social issues, saw in the Igwerians the same spirit of resistance and change that had inspired his best performances. Amaka, a beloved actress and singer with a reputation for her advocacy on women's rights, was drawn to the movement's fierce independence and commitment to justice. Femi and Amaka became vocal supporters of Paul Igwe, using their platforms to amplify the Igwerians' message. Their involvement brought a new level of visibility to the movement, drawing in other artists who had previously remained on the sidelines. For them, supporting the Igwerians was more than just a political stance. It was a moral imperative. "I've played heroes on screen," Femi said during an interview on Sunset Television. "But this is real life. We're fighting for the soul of our country, and we can't sit this one out. The Igwerians are demanding the change we've all been waiting for. How can we not stand with them?" Amaka echoed his sentiments during a performance at a benefit concert for the movement. "We sing about freedom, we act out stories of justice, but now it's time to live those values. The Igwerians aren't just talking about change, they're making it happen, and we're going to stand with them every step of the way." Their passionate support galvanized the artistic community, leading to a wave of endorsements from other Muguwood stars, musicians, and even directors. The Igwerians were no longer just a political movement, they were becoming a cultural phenomenon. The counterattack. Chief Elenian's envelopes. Chief Bisola Elenian and his supporters, recognizing the influence of Muguwood, decided to strike back. They began distributing large envelopes of money to some of the industry's biggest names, urging them to publicly endorse Elenian and denounce the Igwerians. The offer was tempting: fame, fortune, and favor with one of the most powerful men in Muguland. Soon, several top-tier actors and musicians who had previously remained neutral or silent began to emerge as vocal supporters of Chief Elenian. These endorsements were plastered across billboards, social media, and television screens, presenting Elenian as the candidate of stability and tradition. One of the most prominent voices in Elenian's camp was Toke Isaac, a superstar actress known for her glamorous roles and larger-than-life persona. Toke Isaac, who had long been a darling of the Muguwood scene, took to the airwaves to declare her support for Chief Elenian. "I believe in continuity, in experience," Toke Isaac said during an interview on CVT-TV, a network known for its pro-Elenian stance. "Chief Elenian represents the values that have kept Muguland strong. We need a leader who understands the complexities of our nation, not a group of unruly activists who want to tear everything down." The endorsements from Muguwood's elite created a stark divide within the industry, with some artists aligning themselves with the establishment and others with the Igwerians. The split was more than just political. It was personal, as friendships and professional relationships were strained or broken. The Igwerians strike back. The Igwerians, true to form, did not take the endorsements of Elenian lying down. They saw the involvement of these Muguwood stars as a betrayal of the very ideals that the industry had often portrayed in its films and music: justice, equality, and the fight against oppression. On social media, the Igwerians launched a relentless campaign against the pro-Elenian artists, calling for boycotts of their movies and music. Hashtags like #BoycottTheSellouts and #NoToOppression trended as Igwerians organized petitions against the artists who had taken Elenian's money. One of the most significant targets of this campaign was Toke Isaac. The Igwerians accused her of selling out for money and turning her back on the people who had made her a star. They took their campaign global, petitioning platforms like Amazon Prime Video and Netflix to remove her films, arguing that she was using her influence to support a corrupt regime. The pressure worked. Within weeks, Amazon Prime Video announced that it was pulling one of Toke Isaac's latest films from its platform, citing the overwhelming number of petitions it had received. The news sent shockwaves through Muguwood and was seen as a major victory for the Igwerians. The breakdown. The backlash against Toke Isaac reached a boiling point when she appeared on a live television interview, where she broke down in tears, describing the harassment she had endured from Igwerians. "I don't understand why they're doing this to me," she said, her voice trembling. "I've always supported the arts, supported our culture. But now, because I have a different opinion, they're trying to destroy my career, my life. This isn't the Muguland I know." The interview, meant to garner sympathy, only deepened the divide. While some viewers felt pity for Toke Isaac, others saw her tears as crocodile tears, an attempt to play the victim after choosing to align with the very forces of oppression the Igwerians were fighting against. On Twitter, the response was brutal. "She can cry all she wants," tweeted @IgwiWarriors. "But we're not going to let her sell out our country for her own gain. If you stand with Elenian or the Agadongo party, then you stand with corruption. Period." The fallout from the campaign against Toke Isaac and other pro-Elenian artists sent ripples through Muguwood. Some artists, fearing similar backlash, began to distance themselves from the political fray, while others doubled down on their support for Elenian, determined to stand their ground. A nation forced to choose sides. As the drama unfolded, it became clear that the upcoming election was not just about politics. It was a battle for the soul of Muguland. Muguwood, like every other sector of society, was being forced to choose sides, and the stakes had never been higher. The split within Muguwood mirrored the broader divisions within the country. On one side were those who believed in the status quo, who feared the chaos and uncertainty that the Igwerians might bring. On the other were those who saw the Igwerians as the only hope for true change, even if that change came with risks. For Paul Igwe and the Igwerians, the battle within Muguwood was both a blessing and a curse. The support from artists like Femi Falomo and Amaka Bradshaw gave the movement cultural credibility and a platform to reach millions. But the backlash for their stance against the pro-Elenian stars also showed the potential dangers of the Igwerians' uncompromising approach. As the election approached, the tension within Muguwood and within Muguland as a whole continued to escalate. The nation was on edge, and every tweet, every interview, every petition felt like a battle in a larger war for the future. The question on everyone's mind was simple but profound. When the dust settled, what kind of Muguland would be left standing?
Episode 13. The Silencing of Chukudifu Ewubiko. As the Igwerian movement continued to surge, their influence reached every corner of Muguland, shaking the nation's political and cultural foundations. The battle for control of the country's future was not only being fought in the streets and on social media, but it also spilled into Muguwood, where the lines between entertainment and politics blurred in ways never seen before. One of the most dramatic and polarizing incidents of this cultural clash centered around Yinka Obatoyinbo, a former darling of Muguland's youth who had fallen from grace after aligning herself with Chief Bisola Elenian's campaign. What followed was a tense and surreal confrontation that highlighted the lengths to which the Igwerians were willing to go to defend their vision for the nation. The fall of Yinka Obatoyinbo. Yinka Obatoyinbo had been a Muguwood superstar, a beloved actress and singer whose work resonated deeply with the youth of Muguland. Her movies and songs often carried themes of rebellion, empowerment and social justice, making her a symbol of hope for many. But as the election approached, Yinka made a decision that would forever change her legacy. She accepted a lucrative offer from Chief Bisola Elenian's camp, endorsing his candidacy and turning her back on the Igwerians. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Yinka, once hailed as a voice of the people, became the target of relentless trolling and public condemnation. Her social media accounts were flooded with accusations of betrayal, and she found herself increasingly isolated from the very fans who had once idolized her. "Yinka, you were our hero," tweeted at Igwe4Change. "How could you sell out to the likes of Elenian? You've betrayed everything you once stood for, and we won't forgive you." Yinka tried to weather the storm, but as the attacks grew more personal and more vicious, she began to unravel. The Igwerians, known for their unyielding determination, singled her out as a symbol of everything they opposed: corruption, betrayal, and the complicity of the elite. The arrest of Chukudifu Ewubiko. Among Yinka's most vocal critics was Chukudifu Ewubiko, a young Igwerian who had made a name for himself as a sharp-tongued commentator on social media. Chukudifu's critiques of Yinka were particularly biting, accusing her of selling out her people for money and favor with the elites. "You've gone from being a star to a puppet," Chukudifu tweeted at Yinka. "How much did Elenian pay you to betray the youth? You're nothing but a tool in the hands of the oppressors." Yinka, already on edge from the relentless trolling, rather than dissolving into tears like Toke before her, decided to use her influence to strike back. Leveraging her connections within the Elenian camp, she pressured the authorities to take action against Chukudifu. In a move that shocked the Igwerian community, Chukudifu was arrested at his home in Alaye City, charged with social media terrorism and criminal stalking. The arrest sparked immediate outrage among the Igwerians. Chukudifu was a popular figure within the movement, known for his fearless critiques and his willingness to speak truth to power. The news of his arrest spread like wildfire, and within hours the hashtag #HashFreeChukudifu was trending across Muguland. "This is a blatant abuse of power," tweeted at Igwe youth. "They can't silence us by throwing us in jail. Chukudifu was only speaking the truth, and now they want to lock him up for it. We won't stand for this." But the worst was yet to come. While in custody, Chukudifu was brutally beaten by prison guards, a clear message from those in power that dissent would not be tolerated. By the time he was released, his body was covered in bruises, his spirit battered but unbroken. The charges against him, absurd and politically motivated, were still pending. But the physical and psychological toll of his imprisonment was undeniable. When Chukudifu was finally able to speak out, he did so with a defiance that only fueled the Igwerians' anger. "They tried to break me," he said in a video posted online. His face was swollen, his voice shaky but resolute. "But they don't understand. We're not going to stop. We're not going to back down. The more they try to silence us, the louder we'll become." The protest at Yinka's movie premiere. The tension between the Igwerians and Yinka Obatoyinbo reached its climax on the night of her much-anticipated movie premiere. Yinka's latest film, The Spirit and the Angel, was supposed to be a crowning achievement in her career, a celebration of her talent and success. But the Igwerians had other plans. As the red carpet was rolled out and the elite of Muguwood gathered at the Grand Cinema in Alay City, a large group of Igwerians descended on the venue, carrying placards and chanting slogans against Yinka. They blocked the roads leading to the cinema, effectively shutting down access and causing chaos among the guests. "Sell out," one of the placards read. "Yinka Obatoyinbo, puppet of the oppressors." The protest was surreal, a stark contrast to the glitz and glamour of the premiere. As the guests arrived, they were met with angry chants and a wall of determined Igwerians who refused to let the event go on as planned. The disruption was so effective that the premiere quickly turned into a disaster. Guests were unable to enter the cinema, and those who did were met with a nearly empty theatre. The press, which had come to cover the premiere, instead focused on the chaos outside, capturing images of the protest that would soon go viral. Yinka, who had been inside preparing for the event, was informed of the situation and rushed to the scene, only to be met with the full force of the Igwerians' anger. The premiere, which was supposed to be a celebration, had turned into a public relations nightmare. The film, which had been expected to be a blockbuster, flopped before it even had a chance to succeed. The breakdown. The relentless pressure from the Igwerians, coupled with the failure of her premiere, took a severe toll on Yinka Obatoyinbo, just like it did to Tokay Isaac before her, though she had sworn she would never end up like others like her, who had allowed the Igwerians to break their resolve. She had expected backlash and thought she was ready to fight fire with fire, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer intensity of the campaign against her. Every day she was bombarded with hateful messages, her every move scrutinized and criticized. Her social media accounts were flooded with accusations, threats and calls for her to be cancelled. The breaking point eventually came during a live television interview on CVT TV, where Yinka was supposed to discuss her new film. Instead, she found herself facing a barrage of questions about her involvement in Chukudifu's arrest and the ongoing protests. "Why did you feel the need to use your influence to have Chukudifu arrested?" the host asked pointedly. "Do you think it was appropriate to take such drastic action against a critic?" Yinka, already emotionally drained, broke down in tears on live television. "I didn't want this," she sobbed. "I just wanted to make a difference, to support someone I believed in. But now everything's falling apart. The hate, the threats, it's too much. I'm just trying to survive in this crazy world." Her breakdown was both poignant and polarizing. While some viewers felt sympathy for her, others saw it as a sign of weakness, a confirmation that she had lost her way. On Twitter, the Igwerians were unforgiving. "Crying on TV won't save her now," tweeted at Real Igwerian. "She made her bed, now she has to lie in it. We won't stop until every one of these sellouts is held accountable." A nation on the edge. The events surrounding Chukudifu's arrest and Yinka Obatoyinbo's public breakdown marked a turning point in the election campaign. The divide within Muguwood mirrored the broader divisions in Muguland, with the upcoming election becoming a referendum not just on who would lead the country, but on the very future of the nation. For the Igwerians, Chukudifu's ordeal was a stark reminder of the lengths to which the establishment would go to maintain its grip on power. But it was also a rallying cry, a symbol of their resistance and their determination to keep fighting no matter the cost. As the election drew closer, the tension in the air was palpable. Muguland was on the edge, with every protest, every tweet, every interview feeling like another step closer to a tipping point. The Igwerians were more determined than ever to see their fight through to the end, but they knew that the battle ahead would be their hardest yet. In the streets, on social media, and in the halls of power, the fight for Muguland's soul raged on, with no end in sight.
Episode 14, A Global Movement, A Billionaire's Laugh. The final stretch of the election campaign had begun, and the Igwerian movement was in full swing. Across Muguland and the diaspora, supporters of Paul Igwe were rallying with unprecedented passion, determined to see their candidate through to victory. What had started as a grassroots movement had grown into a global phenomenon, with Mugulanders from all corners of the world opening their wallets to fund Igwe's run for the presidency. It was a spectacle that had never been seen before in the nation's history, a show of collective will that seemed capable of moving mountains. But as the Igwerians raised their banners and shouted their slogans, the forces of Chief Bisola Elenian watched with bemusement, confident that in the end the raw power of money would trump the idealism of youth. The global fundraising frenzy. Paul Igwe, despite his personal wealth, was known for his frugality. A billionaire in his own right, Igwe was not the type to pour his own money into a campaign. His tight-fisted approach was well known, and it became clear early on that if his campaign was to succeed, it would need to rely on the support of his followers, particularly the Muguland diaspora, who had long been a source of financial backing for political movements back home. Recognizing the need to fund their candidate's final push, the Igwerians in the diaspora sprang into action. Led by a group of passionate supporters in Germany, they organized a series of high-profile fundraising dinners across the globe. These events, held in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Dallas, Berlin, London, and others, became the heart of the Igwerian campaign's financial engine. In San Francisco, a $5,000 a plate dinner was hosted by a group of tech entrepreneurs who believed in Igwe's vision for a modernized Muguland. The event was a resounding success, with speeches, music, and a palpable sense of excitement in the air. "We're here because we believe in Paul Igwe," one of the hosts declared as he addressed the room. "This is our chance to make history, to give Muguland the leader it deserves." Similar scenes played out in Los Angeles, where the city's Muguland diaspora gathered at an exclusive venue overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The night was filled with optimism and hope as donors pledged their support and wrote checks for the campaign. In Atlanta, a $1,000 a plate dinner saw a turnout that exceeded all expectations, with attendees packing the ballroom and raising over $1 million in a single evening. The European diaspora was no less enthusiastic. In Berlin, a power-packed fundraiser drew Mugulanders from across the continent, who opened their wallets and gave generously to the Igwerian cause. The event, which featured speeches from prominent Igwerian leaders and performances by well-known Muguland artists, was a resounding success, raising millions of dollars for the campaign. As the weeks went on, the fundraising tour continued, with similar events held in cities like Dallas, Nebraska, Florida, and London. By the end of the 6-week tour, the Igwerians had raised an impressive sum of money. Enough, they believed, to give their candidate a fighting chance against the well-funded machinery of Chief Elenian. The scoffs of the Elenian camp. But while the Igwerians were celebrating their success, Chief Elenian and his inner circle were watching with a mix of amusement and condescension. Elenian, the king of money as he was known in some circles, was a man who understood the power of wealth better than anyone. To him and his supporters, the efforts of the Igwerians were admirable but ultimately futile. Children playing at a game meant for adults. One morning, as Elenian and his closest advisors sat down for breakfast at his sprawling estate in LA City, The conversation turned to the Igwerian fundraising efforts. "They think they can give us a run for our money," one of his advisors remarked, barely concealing his laughter. "All those dinners, all that effort, and they still can't touch what we've got in the war chest." Elenian, sipping his coffee, smiled knowingly. "Let them have their fun," he said. "When the time comes, we'll roll out the bullion vans, and all that money they raise won't even match up to what I've set aside for a single day." The room erupted in laughter, the sound of it echoing through the halls of Elenian's mansion. They all knew that when the moment of truth arrived, the sheer weight of Elenian's financial power would crush whatever the Igwerians could muster. The quiet cocktail party. While the Igwerians were hosting elaborate dinners and public fundraisers, Chief Elenian preferred a more subtle approach. He reached out to a select group of industrialists and bankers men who owed him favors and who understood the stakes of the upcoming election. Elenian knew that these were the true power brokers of Muguland, the ones who could make or break a campaign with a single stroke of the pen. In a quiet, understated cocktail party held at a private club in Kings Island, LA City, Elenian gathered these influential figures. There was no fanfare, no speeches, no music, just a room filled with some of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the country, all of whom had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. As the evening progressed, Elenian made his case, not with grand gestures or impassioned pleas, but with the calm, assured demeanor of a man who knew he held all the cards. By the end of the night, he had raised 20 times what the Igwerians had managed to gather in 6 weeks of international fundraising. One of the attendees, a billionaire industrialist, quietly wrote a check for an amount that exceeded the total raised by the entire Igwerian diaspora. It was a reminder, if anyone needed, that in Muguland money still ruled supreme. A Twitter space of hope and despair. As the news of Elenian's effortless fundraising success began to trickle through social media and the news channels, the mood within the Igwerian camp grew somber. The excitement and hope that had fueled the global fundraising campaign were quickly overshadowed by a sense of dismay. For weeks they had worked tirelessly, pouring their hearts and souls into raising money for Igwe's campaign, only to be outmatched in a single evening of quiet cocktails and whispered deals. In response to the growing unease, a group of Igwerians called an emergency Twitter space titled "Hope versus Reality: The Money War." The virtual room filled quickly, with hundreds of supporters joining in, eager to discuss what many were beginning to see as a bleak situation. The mood was heavy as the conversation began. "I can't believe it," one Igwerian lamented. "All those dinners, all those events. It feels like it was all for nothing. How can we compete with this kind of money? They've been stealing from us for years, and now they're using our own resources against us." Another voice echoed the sentiment. "It's discouraging. We've given everything we have and it still feels like it's not enough. What more can we do?" The space grew quiet as the weight of reality sank in. But then, a brave voice broke the silence. "This isn't about money," the speaker declared passionately. "It's not about the size of the dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog. Come election night, Igwerians will roll out all over the country, and we will bury our enemies at the polls with our votes. We don't need to be paid or collect money to vote. We don't need money to show up and be polling agents. This time money won't matter." His words sparked a flicker of hope among the listeners. "He's right," someone else chimed in. "We're not in this for the money. We're in this because we believe in something better. Let them have their billions. We have the people on our side. That's worth more than all the money in Muguland." The mood began to shift, with more voices joining in, rallying around the idea that their cause was just and that their determination could overcome the odds. But then, a sneering voice interrupted the momentum. An Elenian supporter had snuck into the space, and his words dripped with disdain. "You really think you can win without money?" he taunted. "I'm sure half of you don't even have voters' cards. On election day, most of you will be busy watching Premier League games instead of voting. You're all unemployed jokers with nothing better to do than go on Twitter and talk nonsense." The reaction was immediate and furious. "Get out of here, you sellout," someone shouted. "You're the one talking nonsense. We'll see who's laughing on election day." The Elenian supporter continued to heckle, but the host quickly muted him and removed him from the room. The interruption had been jarring, but it also served as a reminder of what they were up against, a well-oiled machine with deep pockets and a deep disdain for the people. As the space continued, the Igwerians doubled down on their resolve. "They can mock us all they want," one speaker said, "but we're not giving up. We've come too far to turn back now. This is our fight, and we're going to see it through to the end." The futility of it all. As news of Elenian's fundraising success began to filter out, the mood within the Igwerian camp grew tense. They had worked tirelessly, pouring their hearts and souls into the campaign, only to realize that their efforts might not be enough. The Igwerians had raised millions, but Elenian and his backers had raised billions. For the rich and powerful of Muguland, the choice was clear. Paul Igwe represented change, and change was something they could not afford. To them, supporting Elenian was not about love or loyalty. It was about self-preservation. The lavish lifestyles, the unchecked power, the exploitation of the nation's resources, all of it was at risk if Igwe won. And so, they rallied around Elenian, not because they believed in him, but because they knew that if he lost, the buffet they had been enjoying at Muguland's expense would come to an abrupt end. As the election drew closer, the Igwerians continued to fight, determined to make their voices heard. But in the back of their minds, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were Saul facing Goliath, that no matter how hard they fought, the system was rigged against them. The global fundraising effort was unprecedented, a testament to the power of collective action and the belief that change was possible. But as the final days of the campaign approached, the Igwerians knew that they were up against forces far more entrenched and far more powerful than they had ever imagined. In the end, it was a story as old as Muguland itself, a story of idealism clashing with the harsh realities of power, of hope battling against the weight of money. And as the election loomed, the Igwerians prepared for the final showdown, knowing that no matter the outcome, they had already made history.
Episode 15, The Power of the People and the GoFundMe Debacle. As the final days of the election campaign approached, the Igwerian movement's determination to see Paul Igwe elected was palpable. Despite the daunting financial gap between them and Chief Elenian, the Igwerians refused to give up. They had poured their hearts and souls into fundraising dinners, rallies and social media campaigns, rallying support from Mugulanders at home and abroad. But as the stakes grew higher, it became clear that they needed to harness the full power of the global community, particularly the Muguland diaspora, who had long played a crucial role in supporting the fight for a better future. A new call to action. The idea came from one of the major Igwerian support groups, a collective of activists known as Muguland United for Change. They had been instrumental in organizing fundraising dinners and rallies, but now they were looking for a way to reach even more people, to tap into the latent power of the global Muguland community. One of the group's leaders, a savvy tech entrepreneur named Amanat Yahaya, suggested launching a crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe. "We need to make it easy for people to support us," Amanat said during a strategy meeting. "Not everyone can attend a dinner or write a big check, but everyone can contribute something. If we can get enough people to chip in, we can raise millions." The idea was met with enthusiasm. The Igwerians had already seen the power of social media in mobilizing support, and they knew that GoFundMe could provide a platform to reach even more people. Within hours, the campaign was set up and a tweet was sent out to announce the launch. "Join us in making history. Support Paul Igwe and the Igwerian movement by donating to our GoFundMe campaign. Every dollar counts. #Igwerians. For change, #PeoplePower read the tweet, accompanied by a link to the GoFundMe page. The response was immediate. Within minutes, donations began to pour in as Igwerians and supporters from around the world opened their wallets to support the cause. The campaign went viral, spreading across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp as people shared the link and encouraged their friends and family to contribute. A global movement. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. The GoFundMe campaign quickly gained traction, raising thousands of dollars within the first few hours. Donations came from every corner of the globe: London, New York, Berlin, Dubai, Toronto, Sydney, each contribution a testament to the reach and influence of the Igwerian movement. The campaign resonated particularly strongly with the Muguland diaspora, who saw it as an opportunity to contribute to the future of their homeland. For many, supporting the campaign was a way to stay connected to their roots to be a part of the struggle for a better Muguland, even if they were thousands of miles away. One touching aspect of the campaign was the involvement of the children of the Muguland diaspora. Young people who had never set foot in Muguland but who felt a deep connection to the land of their parents and grandparents. Inspired by the stories of their elders and the vision of the Igwerians, these young people donated their pocket money, held bake sales and organised community fundraisers, all to support Paul Igwe and the cause of change. Even though I've never been to Muguland, I feel like I'm a part of it, tweeted a young girl from Toronto, sharing a picture of herself holding a sign that read, "Support Igwe, support change." My parents always talk about how beautiful it is and how much better it could be. I want to help make it better. Stories like hers spread across social media as people shared photos and messages of support, each one adding to the growing sense of unity and purpose that defined the Igwerian movement. The $1 million milestone. As the days passed, the donations continued to pour in. What started as a modest campaign quickly ballooned into a massive fundraising effort, surpassing all expectations. Within a week, the GoFundMe campaign had raised over $1 million, a milestone that was celebrated with joy and pride by Igwerians everywhere. The success of the campaign was a testament to the power of the people. It showed that despite the vast financial resources of Chief Elenian and his backers, the Igwerians could still hold their own, leveraging the collective strength of their global community. "We did it," Amenat Yahaya announced in a Twitter space celebrating the milestone. "This is what people power looks like. We may not have the billionaires, but we have something even more powerful, each other. Together we can make history. Together we can change Muguland." A thorn in Elenian's side. The success of the GoFundMe campaign did not go unnoticed by Chief Elenian and his inner circle. They had watched with bemusement as the Igwerians organised fundraising dinners and rallies, confident that their financial might would ultimately prevail. But the sight of the GoFundMe campaign, with its millions of dollars raised from ordinary people around the world, was a reminder that they could not afford to underestimate the power of the Igwerians. At a meeting of Elenian's top advisors, the discussion turned to the GoFundMe campaign. "These Igwerians are proving to be a thorn in our side," one advisor remarked, tapping his fingers on the table. "We expected them to be loud, but this is something else." Elenian, ever the pragmatist, waved a dismissive hand. "Let them have their money," he said. "It's a drop in the ocean compared to what we have. When the time comes, we'll outspend them at every turn. The real power isn't in a GoFundMe page, it's in the connections, the favors, the networks. That's where we hold the real power." His advisors nodded in agreement, but there was a sense of unease in the room. The Igwerians had shown that they could mobilize resources on a scale that no one had expected, and the prospect of facing a motivated, well-funded opposition was not something they could afford to take lightly. The Twitter space hope versus despair. In the wake of the GoFundMe campaign's success, the Igwerians gathered for another Twitter space, this time to celebrate and reflect on what they had achieved. The mood was jubilant, with speakers expressing their pride and gratitude for the support they had received. "This is incredible," one Igwerian said. "We've raised more money than we ever thought possible. This just goes to show that when people come together, there's nothing we can't do." But amid the celebration, there was also a sense of unease. The reality of the financial disparity between the Igwerians and Elenian's camp was still stark, and some worried that their efforts might not be enough. "Let's be real," another speaker said, his voice tinged with concern. "We've raised a lot of money, but it's still a fraction of what Elenian has. How do we compete with that? How do we make sure our voices are heard?" For a moment, the space fell silent as the weight of the question hung in the air. Then, a familiar voice broke the silence. Chukudifu Ewubiko, recently released from his ordeal in prison, spoke up with the passion that had made him a beloved figure among the Igwerians. "It's not about money," Chukudifu declared. "It's not about the size of the dog, but size of the fight in the dog. Come election night, Igwerians will roll out all over the country, and we will bury our enemies at the polls with our votes. We don't need to be paid or collect money to vote. We don't need money to show up and be polling agents. This time, money won't matter. His words were met with applause and cheers, as the Igwerians rallied around the idea that their commitment and passion could overcome any obstacle. But the moment was interrupted by a sneering voice. An Elenian supporter had sneaked into the space, and his mocking tone cut through the excitement. "You really think you can win without money?" he taunted. "I'm sure half of you don't even have voters' cards. On election day, most of you will be busy watching Premier League games instead of voting. You're all unemployed jokers with nothing better to do than go on Twitter and talk nonsense." The response was immediate and furious. "Get out of here, you sellout," someone shouted. "You're the one talking nonsense. We'll see who's laughing on election day." The Elenian supporter continued to heckle, but the host quickly muted him and removed him from the room. The interruption had been jarring, but it also served as a reminder of what they were up against, a well-oiled machine with deep pockets and a deep disdain for the people.
Episode 16, The Million Man March in 100 Cities. As the election loomed ever closer, the Igwerians knew they needed to make a powerful statement, one that would resonate across Muguland and send a clear message to the ruling elites. They had organized fundraising dinners, launched a global GoFundMe campaign, and taken their fight to the streets and social media. But now, they needed something bigger, something that would capture the imagination of the entire nation. The idea came from a grassroots meeting in a Lay city, where a group of young Igwerians discussed the need to show their strength in numbers. "What if we organize a million-man march?" one of them suggested. "But not just in one city, in every major city across Muguland. Let's show them that we're not just a movement online, but a force in the streets." The idea electrified the room. Within minutes, plans were being made, tweets were being drafted, and phone calls were being made to Igwerian cells across the country. The Million Man March for Paul Igwe was born. Rallying the movement, the call went out across Twitter, Facebook, and WhatsApp. "On Saturday, we march, 1 million strong in every major city across Muguland. This is our time to show the world that we are united, that we are unstoppable. #Million Man March for Igwe, #Igwerians Unite." The response was overwhelming. Igwerians from all walks of life, from every corner of the country, pledged their support. They organized themselves into local groups, holding meetings in homes, cafes, and public spaces to plan their marches. Those with resources offered to provide food, water, and transportation for their fellow marchers. The energy was infectious, as the movement that had started online prepared to make its presence felt in the physical world. In the days leading up to the march, the excitement reached fever pitch. Igwerians posted pictures of their preparations on social media. Homemade signs, t-shirts with slogans like "Igwe for the people and change we believe in," and boxes of bottled water and snacks to sustain them during the long hours on the streets. "This is going to be historic," one Igwerian tweeted. "We're not just talking about change, we're making it happen. Get ready, Muguland, the Igwerians are coming." The day of the march. The morning of the Million Man March dawned with a sense of anticipation in the air. From Alaye city to Buja metropolis, from Kano to Port Harcourt, and from Enugu to Ibadan, the streets of Muguland's major cities began to fill with people. The Igwerians, dressed in their bright colors and waving flags, were a sea of hope and determination. In Alaye city, the heart of the movement, the crowd began to gather at dawn. By mid-morning, the streets were packed with tens of thousands of people, all marching in unison, chanting slogans of support for Paul Igwe. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the sound of drums, whistles, and the joyous shouts of the marchers. Amanat Yahaya, one of the key organizers, walked at the front of the march, leading chants of "Igwe, Igwe, Igwe." She carried a large banner that read, "For a better Muguland, vote Igwe." As she walked, she turned to those around her, her voice filled with emotion. "This is what change looks like," she said. "Look around you. This is our future." All around her, people nodded in agreement, their faces alight with the hope that this march, this moment, could be the catalyst for the change they so desperately wanted. In Buja metropolis, the capital, the scene was much the same. The marchers moved through the city with purpose, their numbers swelling as the day went on. Young people, many of whom had never been politically active before, joined the march, drawn by the energy and the sense of belonging that the Igwerian movement offered. "It's incredible," said Chinedu Ewubiko, one of the marchers. "I've never seen anything like this in my life. We're all here because we believe in something bigger than ourselves. We believe in Igwe and we believe in Muguland." In Kano, the marchers brought a festive atmosphere to the streets, with traditional drummers and dancers leading the way. The sound of their music filled the air, creating a sense of unity and celebration. "We are one Muguland," a speaker at the march declared, "and today we show that we stand together for the future of our nation." A stunned nation. As the day wore on, the scale of the marches became clear. Across the country, in over 100 cities, millions of Igwerians had taken to the streets. The images and videos flooded social media, showing the sheer size and energy of the movement. It was a display of grassroots power unlike anything Muguland had ever seen. On television screens and in newspapers, the marches dominated the news cycle. Commentators, many of whom had been skeptical of the Igwerians' ability to mobilize offline, were stunned by the turnout. "This is unprecedented," one analyst said on Sunset Television. "We've never seen a political movement of this scale in Muguland. The Igwerians have shown that they are a force to be reckoned with." Even Chief Elenian and his advisors, who had long dismissed the Igwerians as a noisy but ultimately inconsequential group, were taken aback by the sheer numbers. "They're everywhere," one advisor said, watching the footage on a screen in Elenian's mansion. "This isn't just a few angry youths on Twitter. This is something much bigger." Elenian, for the first time, showed a flicker of concern. "We'll see if they can turn out like this on election day," he muttered. But the bravado in his voice was tinged with doubt. A joyous, peaceful revolution. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Million Man March was its peaceful nature. Despite the vast numbers of people, the marches were largely free of violence or disruption. Instead, the streets were filled with music, laughter, and a sense of community that transcended the usual divisions of tribe, religion, and class. The Igwerians provided for each other, sharing food and drinks and looking out for those who needed help. At every march, there were volunteers handing out bottled water, snacks, and first aid supplies. "We're all in this together," one volunteer said as she passed out sandwiches to the marchers. "This is about more than just a candidate. This is about building a better Muguland for all of us." In city after city, the same scene played out. People coming together, supporting each other, and standing up for what they believed in. The marches were not just political rallies, they were celebrations of hope, unity, and the possibility of change. "This is the Muguland I want to see," said Aga Adichie, popularly known as Aga Warrior, as he marched in Enugu. "A Muguland where we stand together, where we take care of each other, where we fight for a better future." Today, we showed the world what we're capable of. The power of the people. As the sun began to set and the marches started to wind down, there was a sense of accomplishment in the air. The Igwerians had set out to show their strength, and they had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Across Muguland, in every major city, the people had come out in force, showing their support for Paul Igwe and the movement he represented. For the Igwerians, the Million Man March was more than just a show of support. It was a statement of intent. It was a declaration that they would not be silenced, that they would not be ignored, and that they were ready to fight for the future of their country. "This is just the beginning," Aminat Yahaya said as she addressed the crowd in Alaye City. "Today we marched, tomorrow we vote, and when we do, we will change Muguland forever." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the streets. The energy, the hope, the determination, it was all there in the faces of the millions who had come together for a single purpose. As the Igwerians prepared to head home, they knew that they had done something extraordinary. They had shown that they were not just a movement online, but a real, powerful force in the streets. And as they looked ahead to Election Day, they carried with them the belief that they could and would make history.
They call us reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't. They call us reckless, they call us wild, but we're the voice of the unheard child. For too long we've watched them steal and deceive. Now we march, cause in hope we believe. Locked up in chains, they try to make us fall, but we stand tall, we're answering the call. Persecuted, but we won't be tamed. For Muguland's freedom, our fire's inflamed. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lies. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. The streets are burning with the passion of the brave. No chains can hold us, no power can enslave. They say we're rebels, but we know we're right. Corruption crumbles when we unite. On social media, in the open streets, our voices thunder, refusing defeat. They throw us in cells, accuse us of treason, but we keep fighting, for we are the reason. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbowed, unbroken by the lights. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. We fight for the future, we fight for the land. With hearts full of fire, we'll make our stand. They can't break our spirits, they can't make us fall. In the name of Muguland, we answer the call. We are the children of anger, fighting for the truth. Born from love for our land, the fire of the youth. We stand unbound, unbroken by the lights. With Muguland in our hearts, we rise, we rise. We are the anger, we are the flame. For the love of Muguland, we'll fight in her name. With unyielding hearts, we'll carry the fight. In the dark of corruption, we'll be the light.